In this attachment to our testimony, the one entitled, "Which workers will benefit if the minimum wage is raised to $8.50 an hour?" We do have a table that uses, that breaks this down. This is for the $8.50 an hour increase. For that increase to $8.50, we estimate that that would increase wages for 880,000 New Yorkers, and the plan of going to $10 an hour in 3 steps would be over $1 million. In terms of the breakdown we have of that, we break it. I think it's possible to do the analysis of small versus large business. But what we have, the breakdown we have, is the number of, we take our 880,000 and say that 407,000 of that is in retail and food service industries, and we have breakdowns on, you know, the age of workers, the number of hours worked per week. But I don't know if the current population survey, which is the data from the Census Bureau that makes it possible to do this analysis, would allow us to do it on firm size, but we'll look at that.
Thank you.
I don't know if, yeah, so we'll find out if we can do that with the current population survey, because so far we've just broken it, in our industry breakdowns, we've just broken it down by retail, trade, food service, and total.
Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you. Sadeh?
My name is Sadeh. I'm a staff attorney at the National Employment Law Project. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that does a lot of work on employment policy and on minimum wage. Specifically, we've worked with dozens of state legislatures and with the Congress on efforts to raise the minimum wage. Thanks so much for having this forum. Because so many points have already been made, I'm just going to take the opportunity in these couple minutes to respond to some of the questions that you all had, both in this panel and then earlier. First, on the job killing argument, I mean, I think Frank is totally correct that I think it is clear that, the best studies out there show that there actually is not a negative job effect from raising the minimum wage. There was the study that FPI did looking at New York's minimum wage increase specifically, and there was, the seminal Card-Kruger study from the early 1990s that basically compared counties along the New Jersey, Pennsylvania border when New Jersey raised its minimum wage and Pennsylvania did not, and found no negative job impact. And what's happened recently is that a team of economists replicated that study nationwide. So they basically looked at, over 500 pairs of counties from the period of 1990 to 2006, where one state raised the minimum wage and the other did not across the state line, and they found that there was absolutely no pair of counties where the higher minimum wage caused job loss or caused businesses to flee across the state border. And they kind of, really did a good critique on the methodology that opponents of the minimum wage had used to find that there had been a negative job growth. And so those studies are available up there if you want to take a look. On the, I think the other important thing about raising the minimum wage in this economy especially is that NELP has done analysis showing that, while during the recession we lost jobs across industries, across occupations, really the job growth since the recession has been disproportionately driven by jobs that pay very low wages, under $10 an hour, like retail, cashiers, food prep. These are the jobs of the future. These are jobs that are disproportionately occupied by women, and so we need a decent wage floor to raise pay scales in those jobs if we want a recovery that works for all New Yorkers. One of the business owners made the point about turnover. There is great research that shows that when you raise wages, you decrease turnover significantly. That saves businesses in terms of restaffing and rehiring and retraining costs, and those are, savings that benefit the economy as a whole. I think on the preemption, NELP is very into non-preemption. We think it's, a key way for local areas to be able to respond to conditions that are happening in their local communities. And what this bill would do is just give localities the power, if they want to, at some future point, to act on their own to raise wages beyond what the state mandates. San Francisco and Santa Fe now have city minimum wages that are over $10 an hour and that are also indexed. So they go up every year with inflation. And in San Francisco, California state minimum wage is already $8 an hour, and there's a bill pending to raise it further and to index it as well. So, I think of, the San Francisco example is, New York City is definitely an expensive place to live as well. And then finally on the tip worker, New York is, relative to the rest of the states, kind of decent on this. It's better than the federal minimum wage for tip workers, which is $2.13 an hour and has been for 20 years. But there are 7 states that have eliminated the tip credit completely for tipped workers. And these include states like Washington and Oregon, where the minimum wage is already $9.04 and $8.80 respectively, and is also indexed. So there are states that are better than New York on this front. And again, tipped workers, disproportionately women, even more so than minimum wage workers as a whole. This is also a key part of raising wages for our low-wage workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been joined again by Senator Rivera and Senator Dan Squadron. I have 2 questions. First, do you know of any credible policy argument against allowing localities to adopt higher minimum wages in response to local needs?
Do I know what? I'm sorry.
Of any credible policy argument against allowing localities to adopt higher minimum wages in response to local needs?
No, I think the policy arguments that are made are the same that are made against, raising the minimum wage in general, which is that they kill jobs. And there's actually a great study that's San Francisco specific that I can give to James Watson so that he can share that shows that when San Francisco implemented its citywide minimum wage law, that did not have an effect, a negative effect on jobs.
And last question, I know in some shape or form has been answered previously, but the New York Minimum Wage Act calls for wages which can provide workers adequate maintenance for themselves and their families. Would you say that the current minimum wage achieves that?
No, I don't. Frank pointed out that the minimum wage would be $10.70 an hour, and that's just if it had kept pace with inflation since 1970. So we're already, $3 and change below that. And I think that also highlights the importance of indexing generally, because, on the federal level, for example, Congress has only acted 3 times in the last 30 years to raise the minimum wage. So minimum wage earners are dependent on, legislatures acting to make sure that the minimum wage goes up. And so what you have is you have years go by when wages are frozen and buying power is eroding, and then all of a sudden there's this very modest jump in the minimum wage, and then it happens again. And so at the end of the day, you're left with a minimum wage that's significantly below what would have happened if the wage had simply kept pace with the cost of living. We're not even talking about an increase here. We're just talking about maintaining buying power so that people can, support themselves.
Right. Thank you. Senator Krueger? Oh. Okay, sure. So then next is Milan Vaught.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, senators. I wanted to start by acknowledging Senator Espaillat and your tremendous leadership on this issue, in particular considering a bill that starts to get closer towards what we all feel the minimum wage should be, and of course including requisite and adequate indexing provisions. So my colleagues have spoken at length about some of the policy aspects and the economic arguments. I was hoping to kind of talk a little bit briefly about the experiences that we see as a statewide legal service and membership organization in terms of what is the impact, what does it look like in terms of its effect on workers throughout New York State. We're really glad that we had the opportunity to have you all hear from one of our members and former clients, Myrna, earlier. I'll allude to her case in about a minute, but it's really important, and I implore everyone who's looking at this issue to continue to speak to workers to really understand the day-to-day effect that this issue has on their lives.